All right, can everyone see that? Can somebody jump on and just see if they can see that or not?
I can see it.
Okay, awesome, thanks. Okay, so one of the questions that we get a lot is about some gifts and inducements. Whether it is as a client that we want to give things back to our buyers or sellers, or we want to give things out as agents to promote our business. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, as you guys are probably well aware of in anything that we do. There's the right way, and then there's the complicated way as well. So I'm going to share with you how we do this in a contract and how we can actually make it easier for us and save us some money. So as we go through this, I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what some of the agents have been doing that's going to cost them money in the long run. And when they come back to us and say, well, how do we do it? The process is actually longer once you do it the wrong way to fix it than it is if just do it the right way the first time. So at any point, let me know if you have any questions, because I want to make sure that we understand it. It's not a very long thing today, so if there's questions, just jump in and ask me. So gifts and inducements, what can I give and how? Can an agent give money from their commissions? So just a real quick question. Can an agent give money from their commissions?
Are you saying like towards closing costs? Or are you talking about, can you expound on that?
That could be one of them. Just when you receive,
yes.
When you get money, can you give that money out?
Yes.
Okay. And this is one, there's a couple reasons that we can give it out, and there's a couple reasons we can't give it out. And I want to talk about really three of them. Say, can I give money to other licensed agents, unlicensed individuals that are not my clients, and my clients? So there's three different categories that we're looking at when we're talking about giving out money and giving out some of our commissions, and they're all different. So if you look at other licensed agents, okay, so this is another person who's in the state of Utah that has a license. This is done through a referral agreement that the brokerage signs and the receiving brokerage signs. So if anyone that you're working with has a license, regardless of whether they're with Century 21 or they're not with Century 21, if you want to split some of the commission or you wanted to give something back to them, the easiest way to do that is a referral form. There's two things you're going to need: the referral form and the W-9 form from Century 21. So as you know, we're going to be taxed on everything that comes into to you as an individual and the organization. This W-9 form is what is sent so that the taxes can actually be given to the right person, not have us be liable for it. So that's easy to get. I can give that to anybody when you get your referral forms. Now we can send that out. But that's the easiest way to give money to an agent that's licensed. If they're licensed in another state, they're not licensed in Utah, then we would have to look at them not as a licensed agent. We're specifically talking about in Utah. So now let's talk a little bit about unlicensed individuals. Okay, so when I say unlicensed individuals, I'm not referring to our clients. Our clients, they aren't going to be licensed, but there's another section that we're going to handle with them specifically. But this one is unlicensed individuals. Now we can give money or a gift to them if it's considered an unsolicited referral. So an unsolicited referral is one that I'm not going to them and saying, hey, if you give me a referral, then I will give you X, Y, Z, whatever it ends up being. This is I included the rule here just so that you can see it. This is considered part of our prohibited conduct as applicable to licensed individuals. So this is prohibited for us: paying a finder's fee or giving any valuable consideration to an unlicensed person or entity for referring a prospect, except that a licensee gives a gift valued at $250 or less to an individual in appreciation for an unsolicited referral or a prospect that results in real estate transaction. Okay, so I had an experience once where a guy from out of town came and said, hey, I've got some friends that are going to be buying up in the Park City area. If I refer these guys to you, will you give me a little bit of a kickback? And basically what he was wanting was part of the commission, because he was looking at as some big commission checks for these friends of his. And the reality is, if he's unlicensed, the highest I could even go would be $250, and that would be if it was some kind of a gift or a value up to that point. So really what you want to avoid saying is, you can't say, if you give me a referral, I will do XYZ. Okay, so in our marketing, if we're doing any kind of marketing whatsoever that says, hey, I'm going to give away lagoon tickets. If you give me a referral, I'll give you lagoon tickets. That would not be acceptable under these terms. Now, if somebody gave you a referral and you reached out to them and said, hey, just out of appreciation for you give me referral, I'm going to send, here's a gift card. Here's some tickets to a lagoon or something like that. That's different than if you are actually advertising and saying, if you do this, then I will do this. That's where we get in a little bit of trouble for unlicensed individuals. Now, the question that we're asked a lot is, if these are, like, you'll see posters or something, or like there was at one point when I was in the movie theater, you could see a sign that said, hey, buy with us and you can get X, Y, and Z. Keep in mind that this is unlicensed individuals that are not your clients. Okay, these are not people you're actually going to have buy and sell, or you're in the middle of a transaction with. There's different rules, and we'll get into the different rules if they're actually your client, and you can do, incentives for your clients as long as it's business that's being done. Okay, does anyone have any questions about unlicensed individuals? Okay, so that used to be 150. The last couple of years, it went up to 250. Just give you an idea of some of the things that I like to do with this one. And I'm sure there's, lots of different ways that you can incentivize people. But for me, when somebody calls me up and says, hey, I have a friend that wants to buy or sell in real estate, the first thing I do for that friend, and I will send them, $20 worth of ice cream cards and just say, hey, just out of appreciation, I want to do this. Then when that client goes under contract, or I'm actually working with them, I'll send them another gift, like dinner or something like that, for like $50. And then when that individual closes, I might do a dinner and an activity where it might be worth $75, $80. And so I'm staying under the 250, but I'm also splitting that up so that I can recognize them through the process. So just use that it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. It just can't be more than that for the one referral. Okay, so then the question is, what about your clients, your buyers and your sellers? The answer to this obviously is yes, you can give back. There's two requirements that the state of Utah requires for us. Number one is the underwriter is aware of the gift. So it can be on the closing documents, the CD. Number two is the brokerage is aware and has signed off on this gift. So we've got to, obviously, if you remember that all the commission is coming into the brokerage and you are a representative of the actual principal broker. So all listings and all buyers actually belong to the company, and then you are the assigned agent under that. So the broker needs to be aware if there's money that's coming in into the organization or not coming in based off of that. This is the rule right here. Gift and inducement. An inducement gift is permissible and is not an illegal sharing of commissions if the principal broker or affiliated licensee offering the inducement gift to a buyer or seller complies with the underwriting guidelines that apply to any loan in the transaction for which the inducement has been offered. So as long as we're doing a transaction with them, then they're not a problem. A closing gift is permissible and is not a legal sharing of your commission. So if you want to do a closing gift or you want to do something for your clients, remember the key here is that they're actually your clients that you're doing this for. So now the big question is, how do I do this? So this is where I get a lot of questions on how to make sure this happens. First, let's take the number one thing that we've got to make aware of. The underwriter is aware of the gift. Okay, so if this is included on your CD, on the closing documents for the purchase or the sale of the home, and it's actually on there as an item as coming from an agent, then the underwriter is aware of it. They're going to see it, they're going to understand it, they're going to know it's there. The challenge is in the screen section here, a letter from the loan officer is not enough. We will need to make sure the underwriter is aware of this. The reason for that is because loan officers sometimes think that, yes, this is no big deal, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's not a big deal. Or they've come to us as agents and they say, which is, you know, the challenge, where they say, well, I don't want to put it on the contract. I don't want to put it on the closing disclosure, or we're past the 3 days, and if we put it on the closing disclosure, then we'll have to redisclose, and that's the reasoning for behind it. So as long as we get proof that the underwriter is aware that it's there and that's happening, then you'd be fine with that. But the challenge is a lot of times we try to hide it from the underwriter, and that's not okay. So if this is included, then they know. If it's not, we need to find some other way of doing it. The second one is the brokerage is aware of it and signed off on the gift. Okay, there's two ways to make this happen. One is they've signed escrow instructions. So as you know, if you have any escrow instructions that changes your commission whatsoever, that has to go through the principal broker, and that we have to actually get that signed and recognize that it's there. So you would actually just disclose it there. The second one is an addendum to the buyer broker agreement or the exclusive right to sell agreement. So if you do an addendum to either one of those two documents, that itself will be enough of the brokerage is aware. So really the broker needs to be aware that this is happening. That's where you're going to do it. So you wouldn't wait until after closing to give them money. That would not work. And there's some problems with that as well. So how is that done? So I want to go through a quick example of this, and then I'll open it up for questions just so that you can see how it's done. So let's say you represent a buyer in a transaction. The purchase price is $800,000. Seller's offering 3% commission. You're feeling extra giving, and you'd like to give $5,000 back to your client to help with closing costs. Okay, so it doesn't seem like that. It's a pretty typical transaction as far as like if somebody wants to give something back. That could be a home warranty, that could be $500, it could be $1,000, it could be 1%, could be all of the commission. It doesn't really matter as long as you know what those are. So the first thing I would suggest we do is we figure out what those numbers are. You got to know what numbers you're working with. So 3% commission on 800,000 is $24,000. I'm going to pay my buyer's closing costs of $5,000. So my total commissions received is $19,000. So pretty easy math. Hopefully you can follow that. But we want to make sure that we're looking at these numbers. One of the problems I'm seeing is the numbers that are coming in on our addendums are not the right numbers. So you just really want to make sure that you're adding up the right numbers so that when you're asking for things, you're getting the right things back. So getting closing costs in an offer. Okay, so here's the scenario that we want. We want to give them $5,000 back. As you're aware, there's a contract that the Repsi is going to represent a contract between the seller and the buyer. It has nothing to do with the agents. The agents portion of it is going to be the buyer broker agreement for if I'm representing a buyer, or the exclusive right to sell agreement if I'm working with the seller. Now, what links me to the seller's agent, us as a buyer's brokerage, links us to the seller's brokerage is the MLS. That's where you're getting the BAC. The MLS is linking us to those. So if they're not part of the MLS, then there's no link between the two. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that as you're going through it. Okay, so in this scenario here, the best way for your client to get is to get closing costs paid by the seller and not by the agent. So remember that the agent is trying to get back $5,000, but the agent is not linked to the buyer and the Repsi. They're linked just directly to the buyer. So giving them the money back, if I was going to give my client closing costs, in order for me to give them closing costs, I would actually have to receive the money to give them something. I cannot give something unless I have it. So this is one of the challenges, is if we put it just in our buyer broker agreement and I say, okay, I'm going to pay my sellers or my buyers $5,000 in closing costs to help them with that. I announce it to the underwriter, and my brokerage knows about it, and I put it on the CD. The challenge that we run into with this, if that's the direction we're going, this is the direction I've seen it happen many times, is that $5,000 is actually recognized as income for you as an agent and then given back to the client. So that creates two problems for you. Problem number one is Uncle Sam, our government, is not going to just say, oh, you didn't collect that money, so you're not due on taxes. So they're actually going to tax you on that amount of money that you gave away. Number two is you're part of Century 21 franchise. Well, Century 20 franchise charges us a 6% franchise fee. They charge that on all monies received. Now, just because you gave that money away doesn't mean you didn't receive it. So from their perspective, they're looking at it as you're receiving this money. So we have two problems. Taxes, Century 21, we want to save you money. So if you just do escrow instructions and your buyer broker agreement that says I'm paying this amount to my buyer, $5,000 in this case, then we're going to recognize those two fees and we're going to have to cover those. Now, if you're giving away $250 or $500, you know, it's a decision of, you know, 20 bucks, 30 bucks. That's, you know, can it be done that way? Yes. But you just be aware that you're going to be paying on the $20. So it's not a big deal, but you start getting up into the $5,000, $10,000 range, and all of a sudden now it becomes a big deal and you would rather not be paying taxes on that. Okay. So we want to reduce. So the best way is for our clients' closing costs to be paid by the seller and not the agent. Okay. So I want the seller actually paying the closing cost. We want to reduce the amount of commission to the seller is paying, and instead we'll have them pay that amount to our buyers in closing costs. So really we're doing two things. One is we're reducing our commission that the seller is going to pay for us. Okay. The second thing we're going to do is we are going to ask the seller to pay the buyer's closing costs. So by having the seller pay the closing costs, you as agent will not receive the money, then pay your client, saving you on the taxes and the franchise fee. So for the seller, it's the same thing. Net is the same. But for you, it's not the same. So we want to make sure that we're explaining it to the seller that we're reducing the commission and we're having them pay that commission closing costs to the buyer so that we're the same. Okay, so here's how it's done. Number one, I want you to communicate with your client and with the seller's agent. I can't tell you how many times I've had to get on the phone with other agents and explain what we're trying to do because they're upset that we're now at the closing, right before closing, and we're now asking them to pay closing costs, and that isn't fair to the seller. How many times I've had to explain that the seller is netting the same amount. So this is a big key here, is that as long as we are reducing commission and putting it in the contract as closing costs, net to the seller does not change. Okay, so there's three things we have to do here. First thing is we want to create an escrow instructions. The escrow instructions need to look something like this. You'll pull it up, real estate brokerage escrow instructions. Line number 1, brokerage commission, the seller's brokerage and the buyer's brokerage authorize the escrow office to disperse the payment of commissions directly to the buyer's brokerage as follows. Okay, so this is what it's talking about specifically to the buyer's agent. $19,000. So we're going back to our example. We're going to take $19,000 of the purchase price. Now, in addition, number 2, I want you to think of this scenario. I just sent over a reduction in my commission, but I still have not got something from the seller saying they're willing to pay my buyer's closing costs. So I need to have something in here that protects me, because if I just put, I'm reducing my commission to $19,000, then the seller refuses to sign the addendum, and then the seller's agent says, no, I'm not paying you any more than that, then I just lost $5,000 to the other agent, and I have nothing that I can go back and say, this is not right. Okay, even though it wouldn't be really right that they did that, it's also part of the paperwork. So I like to put in this number 2 here. Additional terms. Buyer's brokerage agrees to reduce commission to $19,000, provided the seller accepts the addendum, paying buyer's closing costs in the amount of $5,000. Okay, so what I'm basically doing on these escrow instructions, I'm saying I'm going to reduce my commission as long as they sign this addendum. If they don't sign the addendum, I'm not reducing my commission. But if they sign the addendum, I'll reduce my commission. So I want something in there that protects me as I'm going through it so that I don't lose money on that. Another key here is we have a tendency to refer to all the fees as brokerage fees. Okay, so at one point we used to call that $295 or $495 or whatever you charge as a transaction fee. Then it moved to a brokerage fee. Now it's all considered a brokerage fee, commissions plus that. So when I see an addendum that comes in that says buyer's commission to, or buyer, brokerage fee to be 0, because what they're referring to is the $295. What they're basically saying is now I'm taking 0 instead of a 3% plus $295. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, any questions on the escrow instructions? We just want something in there that protects you so you don't lose your commission. So we're going to go into there. We have the escrow instructions. Number 3 is we're going to create an addendum to the Repsi. Okay, we want to make sure the seller is paying those closing costs. So in a regular addendum, there is a section that's called closing costs addendum. Now, there's 2 places you can find this on the MLS. One is just in the addendum section. If you have no other items that you're going to input, you can just use the addendum, closing costs addendum. If you're going to add additional terms into your addendum, then you go into a blank addendum and select closing costs addendum, and then you're going to put it in there. This is the words. I've seen it so many times where it just says buyer and seller agreed, or the seller agrees to pay $5,000 in buyer's closing costs, and that's where they leave it. The challenge with that is it doesn't give us the freedom to do a lot with it. So this is written specifically for this purpose. So you can have all of these words in there. So whether you copy this and put it in your own addendum, or you just use this directly here, this is where we're going to get that $5,000 back to our clients. So I've reduced my commission on the escrow instructions, and now I'm putting it in the Repsi. I'm not referring to my BAC. I'm not referring to the commissions. I'm not referring to anything to do with my side in the Repsi. I've seen a lot of addendums come through that they say buyer's commission to be reduced, or buyer's agent's commission to be reduced by this, and that's in the Repsi. Not the place to put it in our Repsi at this time. Okay, so all we're talking about is closing costs. Okay, the last thing we would need to do is we need to update the buyer broker agreement. Okay, the buyer broker agreement is between you and your client. So every couple of years we get audited from Century 21 Corporate, and they come back and look at our file and they say, on this file, you charged 3%, but you only paid us on $19,000. So we want the extra money from that. This is where we're going to identify it in our buyer broker agreement addendum. And we're going to say commission to be reduced by $5,000 and credited back to buyer by seller as closing costs. So we're just basically saying what we're doing with that rest of that money. So it's the same thing if you have a buyer broker agreement that says I'm getting 3% and now you're only getting 2.5%. You still want to come in and do an addendum that changes that to the 2.5%. Now, I would do that close to your closing, not at the start, just because if it falls through, you don't want to shortchange yourself. Okay, so that's the simple way to do it. There's three things that we have to do, and if the amount is low enough and you're not really worried about paying the taxes and the having and going through that process, you can just do some escrow instructions and put it on the CD and make sure that it happens. But this is the right way to save you money and save you through the process. So what questions do you have?
No questions, but this is great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, if there's no questions, it's amazing how, this has happened at least 4 times in the last week that we've been trying to do this. So if you do it the right way, it's easy, it saves you money, and it's not complicated.
Jason, I
Yeah.
just had one comment. So I accepted a 2.5 and I had a buyer broker for 3%. But the one thing I did, not to confuse that, is in the addendum, I indicated for this address. So I didn't, it wasn't right at closing, but that it just changed it for the address that they were under contract for. So if anything happened, it wouldn't change it for any others.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Yeah, you just want to make sure that you're covering your bases just in case things change through the process. And as we all know, in real estate, things change. That's one of the reasons why we put in the escrow instructions that, if by chance the seller does not accept this, then we're not reducing the commission, because we've seen that come back and try to fight us on, well, you reduce the commission, so that's what the commission is. So, everything we're doing is straightforward. We just want to make sure that it's clear. And I think the biggest errors that I'm seeing right now is that we are negotiating commission in a Repsi, and we are, I even saw one last week that somebody had negotiated buyer's closing costs in escrow instructions. So remember, the escrow instructions has nothing to do with the seller and the buyer. It's between the buyer's brokerage and the seller's brokerage. So they signed this thing. I think it was $9,000 of closing costs in the escrow instructions and reducing their commission. And then they're assuming that the seller was paying the closing costs. Unfortunately, the seller was not paying the closing costs, and the buyer's agent, what they were doing, luckily we got this fixed, but what they were doing is they reduced their commission by $9,000, and then they were going to pay $9,000 to their buyers in that. So we just want to be careful with that. It's easy to mess up, but it's also not hard to do. Anyone have any other questions today that I can help you with, or hopefully that was helpful?